Phails at philosophy. What the heck could it be? Life such a mystery. Phails. Welcome to Phails. My name is Philip Jones, and today my guest is David Beaver. Wave to everybody, David.
Hi there. Really good to meet you all.
Yeah. David Beaver is a professor of linguistics and philosophy. He is director of cognitive science at UT. He is a dancer, and he's also a author, a writer. His latest book is The Politics of Language. This is his third book, as well as a number of publications and probably academic journals. And I'm really excited to have you here.
Thank you. I need to, I'm grateful for the plug on the book. I do have to mention my co-author, Jason Stanley.
Oh, yeah.
Down here. He's, although he's underneath me, he's like just as big.
This is a good time, I think, to start the Phil Fails 5 questions.
Good. What do you want to fail at, Phil?
We're going to fail. We're going to fail at slow thinking.
Okay.
Phil fails at slow thinking. And the first question I'll ask is kind of maybe the obvious, maybe not so obvious, but how can Phil fail at slow thinking?
If Phil goes into the voting booth and just checks the boxes for the people on his team, he's done something easy. And it's interesting, this fail. Is that going to be a failure? I might really like the outcome, what you voted for.
If it was all Democrat or all Republican, is that what you mean?
Whatever it is,
Or all
I might like it
independent?
or I might not like it.
Yeah.
So what counts as failure here, right? So you might have done something that I would think was the right thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another sense in which you would have failed to properly, let's say, employ the sort of judgment needed for the democratic process to really work. Yeah?
Yeah.
Different example. I love giving this one to but it's not a failure. Tell me what you think about it. I love giving this one to the students in my class. I'm teaching a class on bias at the moment. Really great students, 40 students. They come in, and after the first day, most of them will sit in the same seats they sat in the first day. If someone's in the seat, they'll sit very close to that seat. I've asked them, they don't care deeply, right, about where they sit. Why are they sitting in the same seats? The answer is, it's the easy way to go. Basically, only turn on your slow thinking brain when there's a danger signal, when you sense something's wrong. Otherwise, do what comes natural. What comes natural? What you did last time comes natural. Your fast-thinking brain has internalized, and your body has internalized the process of walking into the lecture theater on this particular door, walking down the aisle about this far, breathing in a certain way, holding your backpack in a certain way, starting to, at the right moment, sling it out and slide into the seat. Your body has internalized that. It requires no stress, no effort. If you were spending too much time thinking about where to sit, you would probably end up, in some sense, failing at life because you'd be stressed out all the time.
Yeah, it's some kind of autopilot that allows you to just relax and get some self-care.
You don't want to be hypervigilant all the time. Likewise, when now imagine someone's talking to you and you're in a car lot. So they're talking to you in a car lot. They're trying to sell you a car. That person is going to try and make the conversation feel really comfortable, like I hope our conversation feels right now. Like I don't feel that you're trying to sell me something.
Yeah.
And I hope you don't feel that I'm trying to sell you something. But in the car lot, although the salesperson might make you feel that way.
They want to sell you something.
They want to sell you something. What they don't want is to allow your hypervigilance about, is this a good sale,
Ooh, to kick in.
to dominate. What they want is your what Kahneman calls ability to substitute one question with another to come in. What does that mean? The question is, what car shall I buy? Right?
Yeah.
The salesman wants to replace that with, am I having a good time and do I trust this guy?
Yes. Because
If
you'll
the s-
buy if you feel relatability, if you
if the
feel comfortable.
salesperson can manage to get you to focus on that, and that person is a grandmaster at sincerity. That
Mhm.
is, like every salesman likes to say, the most important thing is sales. In sales is sincerity. If you can fake that, you can sell anything. Just
Yeah.
scary.
Fake that. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of Dan Pink's book, To Sell is to Be Human.
To buy is to be human.
To buy is to be human.
Definitely to be American. Curiously, I actually got my American passport 2 days ago. I became an American a couple of weeks ago.
You're an
Got
American
my
citizen
passport.
now?
I am now an American citizen, so I know all about buying.
Should we do the
Yeah.
I don't even
We
remember
have
it.
the Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
I need more practice at that.
Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't remember. We did it every day in school.
I
To the flag
had
of
to
the United
learn,
States
right.
of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It sounds good to me, Phil.
Oh my God.
You're a better American than I am.
So failing one at slow would be to implore it all the time.
That is well put, Phil. I agree. Yeah.
And the other one was the first thing you said about failing at slow thinking was
Let's just pick the reverse. Not applying it when it's important, like in the voting booth,
in the voting booth.
more generally informing political opinions. People go for this fast associative thinking. Conspiracy theorists love to think they're thinking. They love to think they're doing the research.
Mm-hmm.
What they're actually doing, like with numerologists and people coming up with strange associations,
Mm-hmm.
they're actually doing an interesting poetic thing of connecting things wildly that your fast thinking bit of the brain is good at doing. Your fast thinking bit of the brain is very good at getting stereotypes of people saying, yeah, that fits, this story fits. They're not doing slow, careful, logical thinking, but they don't know it. They don't recognize that what they're doing is just seeing patterns very easily that their brain is good at doing. What they're doing is a lot of fast thinking over time.
Yeah.
That's different from slow thinking.
Second question is, how does someone succeed at slow thinking? What would its success look like?
And my first temptation is to say that it's like art. I know it when I see it.
Mm.
I think there's no limit on how much you can slow down on any particular bodily movement or question. I think the answer must be a personal one, that success is if you slow down on the things that are important to you, so that you develop a mindful approach to the big questions in your life and an easy way of flowing through the parts of life that provide the backdrop.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier in the first question this idea that slow thinking is really important when it's important. When there's
Yeah,
danger
that's the
or when
trick. Recognizing, oh, I'm in a So think about when it's right to be looking around all the time when you're walking in the street. There are definitely places where you want to be very aware,
Yeah.
and times when if you're looking at your phone, someone's going to mug you, steal the phone.
Or you get hit by a bike, or you get hit by a
You get
car, or
hit by a bike, right?
yeah,
Doesn't have to be bad actors. It can just be reality.
just,
Has potholes in it,
yeah,
and
potholes. Yeah.
you could put your foot in one. But then if you're spending your whole time looking over your shoulder, you won't be able to attend to anything else.
Yeah.
So you need to find places in your life, which might be Phil's living room here, right here, where you have the ability to feel comfortable with your surroundings and engage in things that matter to you.
Yeah. Slow down. So success is in discernment of application. When are we slowing down? Are we correctly assessing, oh, this is really important to me. This
Yeah.
really matters. And this one over here, it doesn't really matter. Whether it's
Yeah.
walking in a part of forest where there's a bunch of bears and you should be
Right.
bear wary,
Right.
or if it's
In the end, you failed when you get eaten by a bear. Until that point, it worked fine for you.
yeah,
So I think what we can conclude is there's no particular bar for that you've got to hop over to do. I've got to do at least that amount of slow thinking, or I've got to slow think on at least these occasions. You can always better direct your energy and learn from times when you think, I wish I'd thought that through. But also learn from times when you think, I think I put too much energy into that. You said something to me as you were setting up for this interview. You said, I commented on whether the camera was a fraction of the degree.
yeah. You were looking at the lines.
I was looking at the lines and I asked you the question, and you gave me a very wise response, which is that you'd learned that, correct me if I misrepresent
Yeah.
you here, you'd learned that sometimes perfection wasn't what you should aim for.
For
Something
me,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah. I think I said
No, but I think
yeah,
that was very
yeah,
wise for all of us, right?
yeah,
The perfect is the enemy of the good, as
yeah,
the expression goes.
yep.
Yeah. And I think in the case of slow thinking and fast thinking, we can learn to think, oh, I spent too much time perfecting this particular thing. I was making soup for this bunch of people. I took half an hour worrying about the exact proportions of these ingredients. And you know what happened? Everyone got real hungry.
Yeah.
The soup was perfect, and they were certainly hungry and appreciated it when it came. But maybe they would still have appreciated it if I hadn't spent quite so long deliberating about how much Tabasco should be in there and had just gone for it.
You might be very wise, and I know this doesn't fit into your story, but do you know what the perfect seasoning is for food?
What is the perfect seasoning for food? I don't know.
Hunger.
That's another wise remark, Phil. That fits with my story very well. I agree that
Maybe you were
hunger and marijuana are both things that really improve the quality of food.
for sure. Question 3, and I'd like to, for the next 3, 4, and 5, kind of get into practices or things that I could invite into my life to start exercising or practicing more slow thinking.
Good.
So what are some
I
things?
love this term practice. But ask your question.
Yeah, practice. A lot of folks get this term with their profession. A legal practice. I like that. This idea that you're not doing a legal perfection. You're not doing a chiropractic perfection. You're doing a practice. These are all, and that's Phil Phails is about. For me, this show is about me realizing that I can just be imperfect and let that be witnessed and grow observed, grow through experience over and over and over again till greater optimization and greater, perfection. But I'll never reach a pinnacle because there isn't one. And I want to teach the viewers to just start doing whatever it is they want to do.
Wait, did you guys know you were in a classroom? I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, you are. How are you going to teach them this, Phil?
Well, hopefully they'll watch all the interviews and see the lighting improve and see the audio improve and
I
see the
see.
way that I relate to guests
Okay.
improve
Yeah,
and learn from the guests much like I do. And
right. I like that. Practice is this kind of manifold word that has different sides to it. There's like, if I practice, I'll get to do something. And then there's different practices in the world. There's the idea of practices, for example, practices of movement.
mm-hmm.
People in our community, what do we call it, conscious community,
Yeah.
like to have movement practices and voice practices. So they use the word practice a lot. But I also use it in a work context differently. I'm a very happy person this week because two wonderful, I want to give some more plugs here, two wonderful doctoral students of mine just defended their dissertations.
Yes.
Yeah, one, Venkat, has a dissertation on, PhD dissertation on in-group and out-group language.
What is their name?
He's Venkat.
Venkat.
Venkata Govindaran. So that's his name, Venkat.
I'll need a little bit more time on it, but
Yeah.
I trust everybody caught it.
And then I may have messed up his name, and I apologize to you, Venkat, if I did. But
what was his thesis or his
that one is
dissertation?
on in-group and out-group language. So here's a question. If you're talking about people who are part of your team, like it could be a guy talking about other guys, it could literally be talking about other people who support the same team. It could be other people in the same political party. It could be people with the same age, or they go to the same university.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Got in-groups, are groups of people who are like-minded and busy with related practices.
Right.
And the out-group is the other team. And so if we suppose someone does something and I want to talk about it, yeah, how will I talk about that same thing that I saw someone do according to whether it's my guy
Or
the
the
other
other
guy, us versus them?
The same behavior. How do we talk about it for an insider versus an outsider?
Right.
And I think of the word tribalism as we're talking about in-group and out-group.
Absolutely. That's a good word to use. So we actually do talk differently about in-groups and out-groups. We tend, for example, there's a theory called linguistic intergroup bias. A bunch of psychologists came up with big words. Suppose one of my guys does something bad. I'll tend to be pretty specific about that. He acted a bit quick. He dropped it because he was in a bit of a hurry. Yeah. Suppose someone on the other team, could be racial team, gender, political, whatever it is. Someone on the other team, because I have these biases, does something. My quick and dirty automatic instinct might be a bit more to say, those guys are so careless.
Or even they're nefarious.
He is so careless.
They did that on purpose.
Could even twist it that way. But here, just look at the difference between saying something very specific, he was in a hurry.
Yeah.
And something general, he's careless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One's an ad hominem attack.
Well, one isn't an attack at all. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
He's
You're right.
careless ad hominem, kind of like
Yeah.
it's his person, it's his character to be
And it
careless
suggests something
versus
about the whole group
the
as well.
context. Yeah.
It's like, because whatever it is, he's in a group that I am suspicious of.
Hmm.
I'm ready to attribute anything I see wrong to broad properties of the group.
Yeah. As opposed to he
So
was in a rush.
I never said anything really nasty about that whole group directly, and I didn't say we're never careless or anything like that.
Yeah.
But it can come out through this tendency. That's the idea of linguistic intergroup bias. So what my student Venkat has worked on is the more general question of how our biases towards in-groups and out-groups are reflected in the language we use. And he's done that looking at using big modern computer technology with these large language models and other stuff like that to rattle through hundreds of thousands or millions of tokens of text and figure out general patterns of the way people behave.
Whoa.
Yeah. So that's that one. And the other student who just defended her thesis on Wednesday, three days ago, is a woman called Anne Quaranto. Hi, Anne. And her thesis, actually, this is partly why I brought it up. That was the segue. It largely concerns the nature of practice.
Hmm.
But here she's a philosopher. So her thesis concerns certain practices that we don't always like, and certain practices that may be a good thing. So consider the practice of dog whistling in politics, which is one she talks about. That's when you say something that seems harmless, but actually there's something under the surface that your in-group is recognizing.
Right.
Yeah. So a classic example is a politician talking about welfare or the inner city.
Yeah. It's
They're
racism.
actually signaling, this is a claim at least that's made in the literature, they're signaling to their own people, this stuff is bad, this is maybe stuff, it can be racist. They may be signaling, we don't like the way people of a certain color behave or use the state.
Yeah.
Something like that. And they can signal those things without using any bad words. But let's go to the opposite. Bad words, slurs. So there are practices of using slurs, but this is another chapter of her dissertation. We can also sometimes reclaim those slurs. So the example that she devotes most effort to is the word queer, where people in the gay community, the LGBTQ community, as it came to be known later, reclaimed the word queer so that although it can still be used in a purely slurring negative sense, it's also something that people can take pride in.
Yeah.
So there are practices of using words, in this case, practices by in-groups to label out-groups, but also practices that in-groups can use to build their own solidarity.
Yeah. Group cohesion.
And if they succeed in using this term in a certain way, it can even become, that is, if they succeed in subverting the nasty use of the term, it can even lose its venom and become in general a term we can all use. That's what's happened with the word queer, where it's fine for me to use the word queer. That's not insulting. There are other words like the N word where
Yeah, I've been thinking about that as you're talking about giving examples of this. I'm in a
where
quickly
it still has its venom.
well, not for the group.
Right.
The group used it, have empowered it, and
This is actually a question that came up in the defense itself. But sometimes for that particular word, it does actually have venomous uses within the in-group as well. It has both uses. Yeah.
Well, I think of another word associated with homosexuality that in England refers to a cigarette,
Right.
which I'm not going to say the F word.
Right.
It's not the normal F word, but it's the one associated with
Right.
homosexuality. And that obviously isn't normalized for everybody because I don't feel comfortable saying it.
Yeah. clearly, and that one, I'm, as viewers may have figured out, I'm British originally, despite
So you got my reference to the cigarette.
absolutely. So despite the fact that I'm waving an American flag at every opportunity these days, I also have a British passport.
I didn't know you could have both.
You can have both.
Anyway, go on. I don't want to digress.
We can talk about that if you like.
No.
But you're allowed to have both Britain and the US.
Well, go
allow
on.
that. And so to me, that term that you're talking about is not quite as offensive as other terms that you might have used. So there's no need particularly for us to be throwing slurs about that might offend someone.
Yeah.
But to me, that word isn't quite as offensive. And but it's very interesting. It's right to be sensitive, not knowing who the audience is and who might find it offensive. If there's no particular need to use it, we don't need to use it just for the hell of it. Sometimes it can be helpful if people don't know what the hell we're talking about, but they've got the internet, so they'll figure it out.
Yeah. Sometimes I think offending people can be a healthy or a wise strategic plan for marketing. Get folks agitated about something, they all talk about it, and you get the old adage, there's no such thing as bad publicity.
Right.
I don't want to play that here with you today.
There's another thing that actually ties into what we're talking about, which in linguistics is called positive politeness. And that's about forming solidarity, about getting closer. And one way we can do that, one of many ways, is by actually throwing insults at each other. So
I do that with the guys that I rock climb with.
it's very much a bunch of guys or a bunch of women together. That's one time that you'll see it. A woman might use the S word to talk about another woman there when she was eyeing a guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, by saying that, what she's saying at some level is we can say anything to each other.
We're intimate.
We're intimate enough that there's no holds barred.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's important for...
And if I call you fucker, what
Yeah.
are you doing?
Yeah.
Give it back.
Yeah.
So if we're in a position where we're close enough to do that, then I've actually succeeded in reaffirming our in-group connection.
A bond, yeah.
Yeah, our bond by doing that. And the use of this particular slur in the Black community that is bonding works partly through positive politeness. This is not to say I'm explaining it away. It has its own history. It's complicated. But one of the things that's going on is that there's nothing we can't say to each other. That's just one of the things that's going on. But yeah, it's interesting, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So well done, Anne and Venkat. Congratulations. Yeah.
Yeah, congratulations, guys.
But to connect back, in case
Yeah, to the question, what kind of practices
question
could
was
I...
about practice, and so there we're looking at practices. Actually, it's an interesting example. Maybe not what would have come to mind. A practice that gets subverted, changed because it's no good. That is the practice of saying the word queer gets subverted and replaced with a new practice that sounds the same, but it's used in different contexts. And I think there's, not only is it an example of a practice that gets changed, but it's also a good metaphor for how we might modify our practices as we go, rather than imagining that we're stuck with whatever it is.
Would an example of that be, in my life, at some point I realized that I could use the word and instead of but in
That's
sentences,
nice.
because they normally, either one will work, and but seem to be more aggressive. That's not quite the right word,
Yeah.
but it's more, I don't know, but seemed to be a negative connotation for what was going to happen next or
Right.
what came before it.
Right. This is very subtle, and I think both and but are very important words. But you're absolutely right that but can seem combative and is bringing up a way of speech in general. So here's a standard theory that actually we were talking about in a seminar a couple of days ago. at my work at UT. It said, so when do people say this but that?
Yeah.
When they say, it's raining, but I've got my coat. When do they say,
It's raining and I've got my coat would also work.
when do they say, he's good looking, but when are they doing that?
Because you're negating the thing that you said before the but, right?
So the claim in the literature that a number of people have made, one guy, I'll give you a nice long name for the sake of it, a guy called Mazia Tusavardani has discussed this at length. Some really nice work on this. Another pair, a guy called Henk Zavat, who's a close friend of mine, and a woman who's also a friend, Katya Yasinskaya. So what's the theory? The idea that you can say this and that when this provides one argument for something, but that provides an argument against it. So should I date the guy? Well, he's good looking, but I've heard some people say some things. So
two
it's
arguments.
Not that I've heard some people say some things doesn't mean it was false that he's good looking, and he's good looking doesn't mean it's false that I've heard some people say some things. But these are both arguments that concern the question of, I don't know, should I date the guy? Should I hang out with him? Should I start a business with him? Should I do an interview with him? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
In a context like that, one would be an argument for, the other would be an argument against.
But it seems like
so we're getting.
It seems like to me that what happens after the but is raised a little bit aloft of the first one.
I think that's right. It's adversarial. So we're getting into an adversarial way of thinking and talking by using but. Now, sometimes that's appropriate. Sometimes we want to have an argument. That is, we're discussing something, we want to put different sides of it.
Yeah.
And if we weren't allowed to nuance it with but, it's like, well, like we've lost something.
But is that an example of the
times,
practice, though? Getting back to the question, is that an example, instead of
very
doing
good,
away of something, just saying, I'll put...
Absolutely. I don't want to talk over you, I'm sorry. But I think this is getting exactly to a practice. So when would this adversarial practice mix badly with another practice? Well, how about if you're listening to someone and they make you an offer, that is, I don't mean make you an offer, literally give you something, but they put something on the table and you agree, but you're qualifying, restricting, nuancing, rather than just being open and listening. You're not listening at that point. You're giving a counter opinion. So I think people, you're really into improv of a
theatrical realm, yeah.
Yeah, and I said not just because we've been talking about contact improv, a particular type of dancing, before the interview. So in improv theater, for example, I think there's a thing where you're encouraged when someone puts something out there, an improv partner, you're encouraged to agree and then add to it.
Yes, and.
Yeah.
Is yeah.
Yeah, that's a practice. Here we've got a bunch of practices of theatrical improv, and this is just a core part of the practice that I think people learn quite early on. Yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe they learn, once they're secure with it, they can mess with it with people.
You can yes and by no butting. But yeah.
This is getting complicated.
It is complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yes anding.
It's complicated. Likewise, no can mean yes. I don't mean in a sense of like consent. I mean in the sense of you ask me and I say, no, that's exactly right. That doesn't mean I'm disagreeing with you.
Yeah.
And there's no consent issue. It's not about whether he said yes or he said no. It's like, so who am I talking to when I say no here? Am I talking to myself? Am I telling you that I had another way of thinking that was wrong? Or am I correcting you?
Yeah. And when you say no, yes, you're right, the first two are to yourself. You say, no, I was wrong, I'm mistaken. And the last one is,
so I want
you're
to
right.
distinguish the practice of saying yes or the practice of saying and, from the practice of affirming, offering affirmation and confirmation. I think it's oversimplistic to think that when you use but, you're being adversarial and failing to go with someone. It could be that that's exactly what's needed. What someone is seeking is nuanced discussion and argument. And in that case, if you pussyfoot around, you won't ever engage. Yeah. Likewise with dance, which maybe we'll get onto sometime.
Yeah.
Someone who's too soft can feel like a very bad partner.
Yeah.
Someone who's grabbing you and pulling you
Also,
feels like a very bad partner.
yeah.
Someone who's got a certain amount of firmness, they yield at the right time and push back just enough when you're asking for it, when you're ready for it.
Yeah.
That's a good partner. Then we have an interplay.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
That's in the practice of dancing, but I feel that
It's an improv too.
Absolutely. And I feel that there are practices of talking, many practices in many situations. For a therapist to say, yes, that's true, but that doesn't mean the therapist is a bad therapist. It means they've decided they want to push you on a certain issue because it's important for them to do that. Now, there might be certain practices of therapy where you avoid that. Who knows? I'm not able to say what works or what doesn't work, but it can be a conscious choice. I think that's what I'm getting to.
Yeah, it seems like I recall.
I think what I worry about, and maybe what you're trying to correct, is the gut reflex, which is defensive, of just saying but automatically, using the fast system, the fact that you've learned this, I think, self-protective approach of not giving your interlocutor too much in one go, but holding stuff back by saying, yeah, but I have my own integrity and my own view, and I'm going to give it to you right now. Yeah. I think that's defensive and shows that you're not ready to yield at the right moment. So you're trying to change your practice, if I'm understanding what you're saying, right?
Yeah, I had been
from a practice of saying somewhat automatically yes, but, to somewhat automatically yes, and as a default.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that on a given occasion you can't decide, is it okay if we go a bit deeper here? Because I'm really curious.
Let's go.
No, but here I'm giving this as an example. I wasn't asking you to do it, but let's do it.
Yeah.
Right? So is it okay if we go a bit deeper here?
Yes.
Good. I'm messing with you. So we want to learn to automatically, I think you're suggesting you want to learn, but I think I want to learn the same thing, to automatically, with most people in most situations, be ready to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
And then only when it's called for, switch into not necessarily more adversarial, but a more contemplative, questioning mode. And let me use the word curiosity. So we want the yes buts to come out in the form of curiosity if the conversation is to be productive. So let's suppose that I'm talking to someone who's much more religious than me. And there are many people who would think of themselves as more religious and would think of me as a kind of godless heathen. Okay? And I'm having a conversation. When is that going to be a good conversation? It's going to require work on both sides, just like a good dance demands work on both sides. It's not going to work if I just shut them down or tell them from the beginning when they're trying to tell me something, yes, but I don't accept this. Like I'm already putting up barriers.
Yeah. You're shutting it
down.
down.
Is a barrier. It's a limit. You can go this far, but no further.
Yeah.
So developing that practice of talking with each other when we have big differences not getting into an echo chamber situation where I'm behind this wall and you're behind that wall, and we're only hearing the echoes from our own walls.
Right.
Avoiding that is going to mean developing practices of discourse, of conversation. Practices that we have to learn. So there's some slow thinking in learning them, like you're slowly taking on and thinking about. It's still a conscious effort. I have to say yes and, not yes but.
Mm-hmm.
But once we've got into that practice as a default, so that it comes quickly and automatically, we don't have to second guess the fact that we said yes and, then we also have the space to be vigilant and know when is the right time to say yes but.
Yeah.
And we can perhaps open up a space with someone who's very different from us, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
And I should say, I fail at this all the time. But if we're lucky, we can get into a space with someone that's probably going to start with more of the yes ands, but where we've got enough of a bond despite our differences that we're ready to be curious about the parts of what they're saying that don't meet
Yeah. The buts.
our right. They
The
don't
boundaries. I think of boundary as
absolutely.
but. Yeah.
They overstep what we're comfortable with, and I'm listening despite the fact that it's uncomfortable.
You take it in, you're willing to be flexible and malleable and to learn from them, even though there's areas that really conflict with your worldview. And the thing that I thought of was what you mentioned earlier about polite positivity.
Good.
This
Positive
idea of
politeness is
positive
like the
politeness,
term,
where
but I like polite positivity too. That's
positive, what was the term is
I don't like the term either. Positive politeness.
positive politeness. It's almost like the no but is an invitation into intimacy. By disagreeing with someone, you've said, we've got this
You've connected
foundation.
exactly. You've connected
Stay
the circle.
with me with this.
That
Don't
was
walk
exactly
away.
the circle in my mind that you've just connected. You've joined the dots, if you like.
Yeah.
So when we're ready to have that type of conversation, which isn't just a matter of our relationship, but how are you feeling right now, Phil? You're feeling okay?
Yeah.
If you're feeling okay, then we can have it.
Yeah.
If you've had a rough day,
Maybe not.
and likewise, if I've had a rough day, even though you might be ready for it, I probably shouldn't be entering into that territory because
Yeah.
I won't be sensitive enough to slow down and be curious at the right moments.
Right.
I'll get defensive. I'll switch into the no, I've got barriers mode too quickly.
Yeah. You won't have the rapport and the relationship robustness to withstand some push and pull and some
Absolutely.
adversarial play.
Yeah.
But not adversarial attacks or fighting. It's really that invitation into intimacy to explore our boundaries.
Yeah.
In ways that might be a little bit
Right.
uncomfortable because they're different.
Right. And then we can get into this slow way of thinking together. Yeah. Where parts of it we can navigate easily. So we learn to talk to each other. We learn what words will upset each other and what words will make the other person feel comfortable. We learn how to sit together. In my life, coming from where I came from, I spent a lot of time in the pub.
Mm-hmm.
That was a place where people in definitely my generation in Britain would feel comfortable, and we could have a lot of meaningless conversations, no doubt, but we could talk about anything.
Yeah.
Because we had this level of comfort in the space. And indeed, you could meet a stranger in that space, someone very different from you, and both know that you felt comfortable enough to have any type of argument or any type of storytelling, or if the night wore on, singing, not necessarily in tune, whatever it was.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, when Rachel, my ex-wife, when we were in Oxford, I
Huh.
spent a lot of times at Wolfson College at the pub late into the evening talking about all kinds of stuff
Yeah.
and singing. And you're right, something about that context made it almost endowed or primed
Right.
with connection and intimacy or a willingness or
Right. It does. And I think it's, although I love beer and other drinks, it's almost a pity that there's too much of a focus. Like the only place I know in Britain where that's that
yeah,
comfortable has a focus on alcohol,
alcohol.
because I think that that's really a shame, partly because um, it means it's not a place where families are comfortable,
Yeah,
partly because the alcohol itself is not all positive.
yeah.
And so, but I don't know any other place at the same time that embodies that spirit of conviviality and ease that allows very different people to get together, usually positively.
Yeah.
I've known a few bars where things might get out of
Well,
hand.
yeah, and I remember
Um,
some things got out of hand at Wolfson Pub. It, I thought the alcohol might help that, might be a lubricant to that, and I don't really drink much anymore or do much of anything other than this. I indulge
what
myself
what's
in
this conversation in your living room?
well, conversating, learning,
Yeah,
seeking, learning
yeah,
from folks,
yeah.
being a mentee. Um, and I brainstormed the other day, well, what would it look like to have a different type of space where adults could go together and play
Well, this talk
and
of
learn
drinking
and
has made me
yeah, get
suddenly
some
want to raise
water.
a glass.
Let's raise a glass. Cheers. Or mason jars.
A mason jar of water will do the job.
Yeah. So I think we've spent the time that would be afforded for all 5 questions. Although, can you think of any like actual practices like, some folks would say for getting in touch with your intuition, or you might do morning pages, you might wake up and write in the morning, or folks that were
Uh-huh.
into meditation, they would say, well, just sit on your mat and for at least 5 minutes a day, close your eyes or soften your gaze and be with your thoughts or without your
So,
thoughts. Are there any practices that you think I would invite into my day around slow
ah,
thinking or around this topic?
you know, when I talk to you, the things that come up, things like talking to people, uh, you talk a lot about, you go back to books pretty regularly
Hmm.
in our conversation. You'll quickly go back to that. Um, you talk about movement practices like climbing and dance. Um, and you also have a meta practice of questioning your practices, and which you're doing right now,
Hmm.
and asking if you should change them. I would say, of all of those, that last one, asking that question occasionally but not too often, that's that's the most important. But I would say what you've presented to me is very balanced, and
Mm.
I would not be in a position to advise you with one practice. Meditation, for example, has a big impact for many people. It's not a practice that I engage in, or at least anything that other people would describe to me as meditation. What I kind of got kind of good at as an academic is, and as an author, is thinking hard about things for quite a long time.
Yeah. Philosophy. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
It and and actually enjoying the process of things not making sense and then
Hmm.
getting clarified and being able to sustain thoughts over years. This project was an 8-year project.
Wow.
Yeah. So there are things that we were busy with in our heads for a long time, and what might look like meditation to someone else is actually me thinking about something that I find interesting. I don't do meditation where I'm just trying to, for example, empty myself. I do love occasionally coming into connection with bits of my body by actually thinking, oh, how does the heel of my foot feel right now? And now everyone listening is like, oh, I can feel the ground against my foot, or I
Yeah.
can feel the chair in your case with one foot,
Yeah.
and the carpet, the rug with the other.
Hmm.
So you become conscious of these things. I don't know if that's called meditation.
I think your dance,
Yeah,
contact improv and ecstatic dance can be a form of meditation.
absolutely.
This
So,
invitation into the present moment.
so if we use the term that broadly, then you're already doing it.
Yeah.
And so I'm not able to advise what practices are going to work for you, but I think if you're a seeker, as you said, and you're ready to assimilate the practices and ways of thinking that work for you, that add harmony for you,
Hmm.
perhaps introduce a little discord at times, a little discomfort as you adjust, but in search of a greater harmony.
Yeah.
If you're able to do that, to ask those questions, if you have those meta practices, those high level practices, then you'll find the lower level individual practices that work for you. And as far as I can tell, that is what you've been doing. You have built this practice that you have right now from scratch, the practice that we're engaged in right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you are building, but you didn't. Sure, you had some models to borrow from,
Yeah.
but you created that and you're developing that. Seems to me that ability to to seek for new practices and adapt them gradually, that's the most important
I
practice.
think this is my new experiment on how to make friends and build community and learn from people and get intimate
Right.
relationships. I think if I have this platform, folks will say yes and come talk to
Right.
me and
Good.
have extended conversations with me and maybe come back and we'll have them over time, different
Good.
conversations.
So that's beautiful, and obviously it relates to stuff that my authentic relating friends, other than you, also talk about the space that they're trying to create, where they're comfortable exchanging things that would otherwise cause discomfort and
Mhm.
perhaps cause the conversation to end.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so curating a space like that where people can harmonize
Mhm.
is is difficult, and you do it in a different way than someone who just goes down to the pub like everyone else they know and just uses the practice that already exists,
Yeah.
which is how I grew up. Like, and as a from like age 16 on, that was the kind of culture that I was, um, uh, let's say, learning and becoming enculturated into. Um, it felt very easy because other people already had the practice, and I could just follow them. What you're doing is something braver of building your own practice.
Yeah, and I'm in touch with the wound at the base of it now
Uh-huh.
and thinking it's not all of it, but I think the wound that was at the base of my previous career or the career I'm kind of overlapping with now in software, I thought, how can I learn something where the value of what I know is greater than the negative impact of my character?
Right.
And then this one,
I'm
I
not I'm
think
not I'm not accepting freely that your character has a negative impact, but I get totally what you're
this
saying.
is the wound. This is
Yeah.
the shadow.
Yeah.
And I think maybe
Yeah.
this whole process here, this new one, the wound is, can I have a platform of sharing with the world other folks that will allow them to come and be with me and accept my imperfection? And not that that's what you're doing or what anybody would do, but I'm sharing the wound that I think for
Right.
me would benefit from refactoring and reconfiguring. And I wasn't aware of it until this moment.
Describe why it's a wound. What does that metaphor bring?
I'm not, my character isn't I'm not bad.
Right.
And holding on to that in whatever way, it's almost might not be perfect, which is great for Phil Fails. Um, but the idea of trauma itself for me might need refactoring. Because in the
Mm.
idea of my trauma lies that idea of self,
Right.
that the message that I took away from that was the wrong message.
Right. I'm very interested in the question of why people and when people focus their life on healing of wounds and the extent to which people are free to make the choice of focusing on wounds or focusing on growth. Is there a tension between those two? I think clearly many people are wounded, and
Mm-hmm.
I'd be the last person to say they should act like there's like nothing's there. I definitely don't want to say that.
Well, I imagine we're
But
all wounded in some way.
well, it's funny you say that because I find it easy enough to identify things in my life that haven't gone well,
Mm-hmm.
but I really don't. I can honestly say that I don't conceive of my life in terms of repairing those wounds. Now, I'm
Mm.
a privileged, I've led a, although there are things that have been problematic, I've led a privileged life in many ways.
Mm.
Um, I had a happy, easy childhood.
This is a perfect segue.
Yeah.
Can we pause right there and conclude the questions?
Let's conclude the questions.
We'll conclude them right here.